Good morning, everybody. I would actually like to start off today by talking to you about a young man by the name of Justin Bieber. Now, I'm sure many of you back in January heard about his reckless drunk driving, partially because the media jumped on it that day. The American people responded with quite a bit of antipathy towards him as well. In less than a week, there was a petition with enough signatures that it had to be responded to by the President of the United States to deport Justin Bieber back to Canada. See, Justin Bieber gets all of this media attention, and yet in March 2011, when bloodshed began in Syria, the American people just stayed out of caring about that for a couple of years, until there came along some serious war crime allegations against President Bashar al-Assad, in which case Americans acted with still mostly apathy. In fact, there was a heavy sentiment of not wanting to do anything with Syria in spite of these war crimes. What we see here is that the American people and the American media do not focus enough on humanitarian issues, and that maybe we need to pay a little more attention to these humanitarian issues. That's why we're here today. I'm Joshua Hatler, a freshman international studies and economics major at Bradley University. I'm from Pekin, Illinois, Peoria's backyard, I guess. When I'm not binge watching shows on Netflix or drinking coffee, I'm usually in class or doing something with one of my few extracurricular activities, including this as well as the International Affairs Organization. I joined this program because I think it's important to both help the community by raising awareness, as well as helping those around the world who cannot speak up for themselves.
Hi, I'm Olivia Hollis. I'm a sophomore history and international studies major. I love hiking. I've been to Nevada a million times. That's kind of my outdoorsy side. But more importantly here at Bradley, I'm huge on volunteering. I'm a fellow. Today we're having a blood drive with about 40 people, so thank you, Red Cross. I'm also a part of SERVE, which has come to the Red Cross chapter a couple times, I believe, to volunteer. And really, when I heard about the opportunity to work in international services, I was excited because I worked one day in the tornado relief effort. I actually rode on one of the food trucks and helped hand out food to people. So I got really interested in the Red Cross, and it was really moving. So when I heard about international services, I was really excited because I'm hoping to one day work in peacekeeping and humanitarianism. So this is kind of my outlet. And so that's why I'm doing this IHL campaign.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gracia Ocampo, and I am a senior political science major with a minor in French and Spanish. And I am very involved in Bradley's campus, being the president of 2 organizations, on the board of like 3 other ones, probably more, just can't come to mind. But I am really interested in just being involved in not only my community, but also just working to educate my fellow students. So when I became aware of becoming involved with this IHL campaign for the first time in Bradley's campus, I thought, yes, I'll do it. I'm not only interested in educating my fellow students, but also becoming more educated myself about humanitarian law efforts, because I want to work in the future with human rights campaigns and things like that. So being involved with IHL has really taught me a lot, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this campaign is going to go.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Eileen Prescott. I'm from Peoria, actually. I know we have some Bradley grads here who might know my dad, Dr. Prescott, in the English department at Bradley. My majors are actually international studies and philosophy with a minor in economics. I'm hoping at some point to become a lawyer working in international human rights law, which is tied into humanitarian law in a lot of ways. So when this campaign came up, it seemed like a great opportunity for me to work towards that. I'm also involved in mock trial on Bradley's campus and the International Affairs Organization, like Josh, as well as the Asian American Association, where I'm the cultural chair. So this is a great opportunity, and thank you so much for your time this morning.
Good morning, I am Cassie Reyes. I'm an international studies major and a women's studies minor. I'm originally from the Philippines, but I moved here when I was 7. I love to read, I love to paint, I love to read books. And I got involved in this campaign because I really believe in empowering people and turning knowledge into action. And one of the opportunities that came about was a joint areas symposium at the University of Illinois, and I'm co-authoring a paper on child soldiers with Eileen Prescott. And with that, I turn it over back to her to talk about the ICRC.
So does anyone know who founded the International Committee of the Red Cross? I do believe someone. So a Swiss businessman named Henry Dunant, back in 1859, was traveling through Italy and saw the wake of the Battle of Solferino. He was just going to do business, but when he passed through this battlefield where all of these wounded soldiers are lying there in various states of carnage, this man actually thought that there should be someone should take care of these people. Their militaries weren't doing it for them, presumably because of the danger. And when he got involved, he organized the whole village around where this battle had taken place to take people in, care for them, give them medical care on both sides with neutrality. And upon leaving this place and having been affected by his experiences there, he wrote a book called A Memory of Solferino. And that book has 2 calls for actions at the end, one of which is that there be some sort of international volunteer force that can provide neutral care to wounded soldiers, the various people affected by conflict. And the second call to action was for some sort of international law that would dictate how you can behave in war and conflict and how human beings should treat each other fundamentally. So those 2 calls to action actually resulted in the formation of the International Committee of the Red Cross to be a neutral force that can care for human beings. And secondly, that second call to action resulted in the first Geneva Convention, which is one of those bodies that dictates international humanitarian law. That first part only dealt with wounded soldiers, but as my friend Josh will continue to describe, that built into the structure of international humanitarian law we have now.
So as Eileen just stated, the first Geneva Convention dealt primarily with wounded soldiers, essentially establishing impartiality in terms of dealing with wounded soldiers on the battlefield. That is to say that medics are to take a non-discriminatory stance in who they help first based on the merit of wounds rather than who is on their side. This just brought a new humanitarian light to the battlefield that was not there before, establishing international humanitarian law, a basic body of law to govern how people can maintain their humanity during times of conflict. So, first, we have the Geneva Convention dealing with wounded and incapacitated soldiers. Then came the second Geneva Convention, a similar principle, but with sailors rather than soldiers. Then came the third Geneva Convention. This established the principle of the prisoner of war. That is, when an enemy combatant lays down their weapon, they step out of combat and have the ability to become what is called a prisoner of war. Now, believe it or not, in spite of what you may hear on the news about prisoners of war, they are to be treated with complete respect and care. They're supposed to be given the right to practice their religion. They're supposed to be given food, water, and shelter to survive. And overall, they are just supposed to be taken care of. Finally, you have the fourth Geneva Convention, besides a few protocols. And this fourth Geneva Convention decided to deal with the way civilians should be treated during times of war, which is great because this brought in a new idea of distinction. That is to say that if somebody is not participating in the conflict, overall they should just be left out of the conflict. This deals with women, children, and combatants, or civilians in general who do not partake in the combat. You also have a few protocols, one of which established that the Red Cross emblem, like they're wearing right there, somebody bearing the Red Cross emblem, or Red Crescent, or Red Crystal, cannot be harmed on the battlefield and are considered a completely neutral force. So next, Gracia can tell you a little more about this fourth Geneva Convention and its implications, particularly relevant to what we're doing.
All right, so I'm gonna talk a little bit more about right now how we got involved first. So me, Eileen, Kazi, and Vicky, who unfortunately could not be here, are the team leaders of this IHL campaign. And how we got started was actually in the summer when Dr. Wills had contacted Dr. Pukowski and Nicole Meyer, who runs the Pre-Law Center at Bradley. And he contacted them about this IHL campaign and bringing it to Bradley. So in return, Dr. Pukowski nominated Eileen and Cassie, and Nicole Meyer nominated me and Vicky to become team leaders of this effort. So once the school year began, we actually started meeting and we started off as 2 separate teams. So Eileen and Cassie did their efforts to recruit some members for their team. Vicky and I had some general meetings trying to reach out to students and let them know what we were trying to do at Bradley. And then came the first weekend of October, us 4 went to Valparaiso, and we were trained alongside half a dozen other Valparaiso students. And we went through Red Cross simulations, we learned about the international justice and child soldiers topics, and we also got to practice a little bit about how we would actually put on a campaign. And this was during a course of 2.5 days about, and then we came back to Bradley, and finally we were all ready and set to fully recruit our team members, get them trained, and get them started on the topics of international justice and child soldiers. Once we got them all trained and we got our recruitment efforts done, we let them know that they had the option of becoming one team, which is what they ended up deciding. So now we are one team with 4 team leaders, and they have decided to do the topic of child soldiers. So, so as Josh was saying about the Geneva Conventions, that's pretty much what we're going to be focusing on. And since our students have decided to focus on the topic of child soldiers, I'm actually going to turn it over to Cassie, who knows a little bit more about the topic. And she's going to talk more about what our students are going to do and the actual simulations that we're going to put in place.
All right, first off, I have a question for everybody. How many of you have children or grandchildren, by a show of hands? Ms. Fox, I would like to ask you how old some of your grandchildren or children are?
9.
9, the youngest one?
One grandchild, age 9.
One grandchild, age 9. Okay, who else
This
has
is your man for children.
Well, Mr. Foley, how many children do you have?
Just 9.
Okay. And how old is the youngest?
Youngest 11.
11. Can you tell me a little bit about their needs? And any of you can go ahead and join in and kind of tell me, what do children need? What do you provide for them?
Home, food, education, love, sporting environment.
Anybody else?
Well, there's 5. 5 right here.
Security, just comfort. Constancy, parenting.
Set a good example.
Yes, and those needs are probably consistent throughout all of your parenting styles. But unfortunately, for 300,000 children in the world today, that's not the reality. That's not what they get. And what we're trying to do is put on a simulation and put on a guided tour, 20 to 30 minutes in length, where we will walk people through the recruitment of child soldiers, how they are seduced into thinking that yes, you should join this force because that is how you get security, that is how you get food. But then some child soldiers are actually forced into it. They are forced to perhaps kill their parents or see their village destroyed, and they think that this is how I can get revenge, this is how I can get power. And so after walking you through that recruitment period, we'll take you into the training of these children, how they lose their identity as they are forced to take on other names, one of them being Hitler, the killer. And that is all that they know how to do, and that is all that they think they can be. And so we try to take you through the different roles that some of these kids will take on. They are not just soldiers or combatants. Sometimes they are actually sex slaves, or they are porters, or they are cooks. But they are still child soldiers, and they are still being used for these purposes. And after going through the training, and after they accept this identity, we want to take you through some of the challenges they face after combat, and some of the issues that they face during reintegration. There are a lot of programs that actually try to reintegrate them back into the community. They have demobilization But the case is that once you lose your childhood, once you lose your innocence, you can't take it back. And so with this simulation, we hope to open people's eyes into the issues of child soldiers and to allow them to come to their own definition of what childhood is, of what security is, and what identity and humanity are. And going off of that, I would like to take you over to Olivia, and she would tell you a little bit more about why we're doing this campaign.
Okay, so we were really excited to tell you what we're doing, and I think Kazi provided a very vivid image of what we will be doing through the simulation. But we also want to tell you a little bit about why we're doing this. And it originally began with the Geneva Conventions that Eileen talked a lot about, and Josh. And one of the mandates, when every country that ratified the Geneva Conventions, they were required as a mandate to educate their public about what are the rules of war. People should be educated about this. So the Red Cross has really taken on the responsibility of teaching people this is what happens during war. These are the rights of people and soldiers and sailors, everyone involved. So the IHL campaign itself has 3 main goals. And the first one is to educate the youth, educate young adults, let them know these are the rules of war. So basically the first rule is, well, the first thing we're trying to teach people is that war has limits, and it's very important for people to understand because not many people are educated on this. I think a Red Cross National Survey found that I think it was only half of the youth knew about the Geneva Conventions or what IHL was. And the second thing we're trying to do is to really change the attitudes of our peers, to educate them on what their decisions can be about war and teach them that we really want to coach them through difficult decisions and ethical dilemmas that child soldiers present. And the last thing that we really want to do is through empowering them, we would like them to begin to take action themselves. Maybe put on a campaign like this, maybe spread the word to people that they know. But those are the 3 main goals of the IHL campaign that we're putting on. So we would love to answer what questions you have now.
I have one. You figured I would. What do you think on Bradley's campus is going to be your greatest barrier to achieving those goals?
Well, I think that one obstacle is just going to be bringing people in general. I don't think there is a lot of immediate interest in what we're doing on Bradley's campus. That being said, that interest can be fostered, and we've sort of split into 2 subcommittees on our IHL team. We have the actual event planning team, and then we have a phenomenal marketing strategy team, and they have some wonderful ideas to bring people in. And I think that we can definitely make this accessible and interesting to Bradley students.
Is your work applicable to your academic coursework?
Well, I'm pretty sure, yeah, mostly everybody here except for Gracia is an international studies major, and actually in Dr. Jeannie Bukowski's IS 103 class, which you take as a freshman, we do discuss some parts of international humanitarian law. Not child soldiers as much, but academically, I think for all of us, it is definitely something applicable.
And it even spurred this research project that Casimir and I are working on now about, well, female child soldiers in Africa. So it transitioned us right into doing some more serious research on the subject.
So this sounds like a really basic question, but I don't think I knew that the Red Cross was at the base of the original Geneva Convention. Is that true?
Well, Henry Dunant, yeah, was pretty much had the inspiration for both the founding of the Red Cross and the Geneva Conventions. So, yeah, they're historically tied up together.
So, as you mentioned, it seems like some of the fixes for child combatants are very similar to the fixes for modern slavery. Have you explored the connections between what things can be put in place to solve both of those problems with the same fixes?
The Anti-Slavery Coalition on campus.
Yeah, I'm actually the president of the Anti-Slavery Coalition, as Cassie said, and actually that's actually interesting. The basis of what we've been focusing on and part of the research that I've done have been more on immigrants, just because I'm also the president of the Association of Latin American Students, so it kind of ties in with my research. But child soldiers has actually been something really interesting, and I'm gonna make sure to talk to Eileen and Cassie about that and try to work something out. Yeah.
You started off talking about, you know, the America's preoccupation with pop culture as opposed to these more important social issues. Have you looked at how these kinds of things are being addressed in other developed countries? I mean, in Europe and Asia, are there similar efforts getting people involved in trying to reduce this problem? If so, have you learned anything from those other efforts?
We really haven't looked into sort of the rest of the developed world's perspective on the issue. I think that would actually be a very interesting thing to do, and that could actually be applicable to the campaign itself. So I guess thank you for that suggestion.
You know,
How would you execute a program like this? I mean, you're going to be going into hostile environments, the adults that are trying to train these soldiers and this type of thing. How would you approach going in and trying to approach the children to you know, be taught humanitarian things other than this violence that they're being taught?
Well, a lot of the time, the reintegration programs that Casimir mentioned will have specific focuses on, like first you disarm the children that are involved, and then depending on what culture they come from, that can have a lot to do with how you talk to them about, like, are we going to help you redefine your humanity based on your religion? Are we going to tie you back into your family and your home so that you can remember what it is to be someone who isn't involved in conflict, who isn't worried about violence springing up anywhere? But it does tend to vary, I believe. Do you have anything else to say on that?
Are you referring to our work on campus, or how organizations and other individuals can go into those countries and help child soldiers?
Yes, other individuals.
Other
I know part
individuals.
of the study, to how do you find the children that are already brainwashed, so to speak, and integrate?
Usually after the conflict ends, the government in power will put on a program that will address those issues, but private organizations like NGOs or international organizations can come in and work through the government and with them to try to find those children. And that is actually a big issue, because most of those reintegration programs are actually unsuccessful, because many children don't go through the program. Some of them are by definition left out. Like in our research, girl child soldiers actually didn't fit in to the original reintegration programs in Sierra Leone. Is it dangerous and difficult to go in there and find those children? Yes. But it takes a special kind of person, heart, determination to go in there and try to address the structural violence and start from the ground up and think about human security and making those children, maybe now adults, secure.
Yeah, I think part of why this campaign we're doing is so relevant to that is that there actually isn't a perfect structure in place yet, and not entirely successful programs for trying to help those children heal and get back to their lives. So by raising awareness about it, we'd hope that more and more people can get involved and like tell their congressman, this is something I care about. So.
What about, I'm reading a lot lately about the ineffectiveness of Americans going there to help them do whatever, as opposed to working to perhaps nurture the adults in Sierra Leone to help the children in Sierra Leone.
That has a lot to do with cultural gaps. As Kazi said, like, really the culture from which these child soldiers come from plays a predominant role in how they go through reintegration. And so there is kind of a divide between the way somebody from the United States would perceive it versus the way somebody from Sierra Leone would perceive it. It's just a cultural gap that really kind of requires some education to kind of bridge that gap.
And the Red Cross, as I understand it, often will send basically any nationality but Americans to some of these areas because of the perception there, as well as, I think, language barriers. A lot of the time it'll be French speakers who are best equipped to go into countries where child soldier use is most prevalent.
All right, thank you very much.